Hey, for those that need it, we'll just do a little refresher on the quadratic formula. We can solve any kind of quadratic, any x squared with the quadratic formula. First thing you need to know, you guys need to know the quadratic formula. So if you want to write this down, it is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And once you know this formula, you can just basically use this formula to solve any quadratic by plugging in the values you know for a, b, and c. So it's important to know how to find a, b, and c. It's pretty easy. The number in front of the x squared is your a value. So in this case, a is 2. The number in front of your x value is your b value. So in this one, your b is going to be that negative 4. So you always got to pay attention to the sign. It's not just the number, it's the sign as well. So b is negative 4. And c is 1. So first you got to just know how to find a, b, and c. So you guys good with a, b, and c? A is the first number, b is the second number, c is the last number. After that, I think it's actually one of the easier math that we do, because all you have to do is change every one of these letters to the number that it's supposed to be. So I don't know if that makes sense. So you guys want to see it? All you got to do is change each one of these letters to the number that we just said it was. So if we rewrite this, we'd rewrite it as x equals, because we don't know what x is. And then what will we put in this negative b spot? So if you come over here, which one is your b? Negative 4. So then this says, what is the negative of negative 4? Or what is the opposite of negative 4? 4. So the first thing you would write in this spot, you would just change it to a 4. Plus minus, and then the square root sign. And so what I say is, instead of just saying negative 4 squared, let's actually get that number. Like, what does negative 4 to the second power mean? Negative 4 squared means negative 4 times itself. So what's negative 4 times negative 4 is positive. So inside this b squared would be a 16 minus 4 times the a times the c value. So I'm using parentheses for the multiply. You could write 4.2.1 like for times. I just use parentheses because I just get used to it. All divided by, now it would be 2 parentheses 2, but you can do that in your head. If it's 2 times a, and a is only 2, well, what would 2 times 2 be? 4. So the first step is just to plug in all the letters. So are you guys all right with that? Like, just all I did is I replaced that negative b with 4. Why did I do that? Because it was the opposite of b. Now this is probably the part where most students would mess up, is they go to type it in their calculator and it kind of gets all messy. So if you want to type this in your calc, just type in the inside of the square root only. So what I mean by that is, when you go to grab your calculator, don't even do the square root sign. Just grab your calculator and start with the inside of the square root. So what's the very first thing inside the square root? The 16. So that's the first thing I'm going to write. So 16. Now you got to be careful, because the calcs have a minus sign and a negative sign. So when you guys read this, do you read this as a minus sign or a negative sign? Okay, be careful. That's 16. It's b squared minus 4ac. So that's got to be a minus sign. So when you do it, you got to make sure you use that one right there. Minus 4 times 2 times 1. And you can use the parentheses if you want. Once you do the inside, you just hit enter, and it's going to tell you what the inside of the square root is. I got 8. I don't know if that's what you guys got. So then when you go to redo this, you could just make it simpler. I usually write this out just because it helps me. I didn't do anything with the 4. I didn't do anything with the plus or minus, so I just write that again. I didn't even do anything with the square root, but what inside the square root? What is the answer I got for inside the square root? It was 8. So inside the square root I put 8. And then that divide by 4 is still there. So now we're almost done. Now all we have to do is figure this part out. And this can be tricky on your calculator too. If you read it, it's 4 plus the square root of 8. Get that answer and then divide it by 4. Or 4 minus the square root of 8, get that answer and divide it by 4. So on the calculator, I'll just show it so you have an example of it. I would type in 4 plus the square root of 8. So 4 plus To get the square root sign, it's the second and then the x squared button. So 4 plus square root 8. And then you have to hit enter because you have to say you're done with the top. So you hit enter. You get a number, but I still have to divide that by 4. The easiest way to do it is just hit divide by 4. And that's your answer, 1.707. Often you're going to get a decimal, not always, but oftentimes you get a decimal. So I got 1.707. And then there's always two answers to a quadratic. Well, not always, but there's oftentimes two answers to a quadratic. So the other answer comes from this minus sign. So instead of doing 4 plus the square root of 8, now I do 4 minus the square root of 8. So on my calc, I would just start over, and I would type in 4 minus the square root of 8. Again, you got to hit enter here because you're just doing the top of it first. And then once you get that answer, divide it by 4. And that's 0.293 if you rounded it. So you're going to get two different answers. Once you get those two answers, you're done. So, got to get your A, your B, your C, plug in the numbers into the spots, do the inside only, and then just type it into your calc. That's the quadratic formula.